Hey, peace, power, and profit, everybody. It's Monica. I just want to. I need to share something really quick. Oh, let me take that out. Do that. Not that. All right. So, peace, power, and profit. I just want to share a couple things real quick because I know that um I don't know. Seems like my points just get tossed to the side when I'm trying to make a point. And I'm really just trying to educate people on some of the areas that they need to be understanding. Okay. I'm gonna share. I'm gonna share my screen because I think that some of you all just kind of need to see where I'm coming from instead of just Okay, y'all. I'm sorry. End up having to do something really quick, but I want to share something really quick. Really quick, 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 quick. I don't even know if you can hear me. Anybody's listening? Click the one. Hope somebody can hear me. Can you hear me? 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 All right, I'm just gonna assume that I can be heard. All right, so I just wanted to share something really quick. It says on April 26, 2024, the Department of Labor published a final rule defining and delimiting the exemption of executive, administrative, professional, outside sales and computer employees to update and revise the regulation issued under Section 13A1 of the Fair Labor Standards Act, implementing the exemption from minimum wage and overtime payment requires for executives, administrative, and professional employees. Revisions include increases to standard salary level and the highly compensated employee total annual compensation threshold and the mechanism for updating these earnings thresholds to reflect current earnings data. On November 15, 2024, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Texas vacated the department's 2024 final rule. Consequently, with regards to reinforcement, the department is applying to 2019 rules minimum salary level of $684 per week and total annual compensation requirement for highly compensated employees of $107,432 per year. Lawsuits regarding the 2024 final rule, are currently pending in two other federal district courts, and the United States has filed a notice of appeal from the November 15th decision. The department will update this notice and additional information as it become available. Why do I bring this up? Because there was a ruling in place for wages to equal inflation. And that ruling was supposed to be July 1st, 2024 was the first raise, and the second one was supposed to happen January 1st, 2025. When the wage standards, hey, what's up in Yami? Um, when the wage rates are not in line with inflation, then people are living a non-livable wage. So it says the Fair Labor Standards Act established minimum wage, overtime, record keeping, and youth empowerment standards affecting employees in the private sector and in federal, state, and local government. Cover non-exempt workers are entitled to a minimum wage of not less than $7.25 an hour, effective January 24, 2009. Overtime pay is at a rate not less than 1.5 times the regular rate of pay is required for 40 hours of work in the work week. So, why is this important? And why do I keep highlighting? And I don't understand why people don't understand. The wage rates are different. We have two sets of standard, one for the private sector and one for the government credit contractors. Now, peep this before I show you again. On January 10th, 2024, the U.S. Department of Labor published the final rule. Employee or independent contractor classification under the Fair Labor Standards, effective March 11, 2024. revising the department guidelines on how to analyze who an employee or independent contractor under the Fair Labor Standard Act. This rule rescinds the independent contractor status under the Fair Labor Standards Act rule, and that's 2021 IC Rule 36 FR 1168 that was published January 7, 2021. This guide will be updated. So let's look at it because this is important. This is the second problem. All of this is being looked at because they are trying to report who is an employee and who is a contractor and the taxes. So this is why this come into play. Because remember, payroll taxes is where your state also gain revenue, not just the federal government. And so when those numbers seem to be decreasing or those reports trends are starting to go downward, they start figuring out what's going on. Independent contractor and employee are some of the areas where this is happening, or people not filing taxes. And so, mainly for the states. So, in summary, it says the Department of Labor is modifying wage and hour division regulation to replace its analysis for determining employee or independent contractor classification under the Fair Labor Standards Act with analysis that is more consistent with the judicial precedent and the Act's text and purpose. This rule is effective on March 11, 2024, and this is a governmental website, so this ain't no shenanigans. All right. So let me keep going. It says the final rule addresses how to determine whether a worker is properly classified as an employee or independent contractor under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Congress enacted the FLSA in 1938 to eliminate labor conditions detrimental to the maintenance of the minimum standard of living necessary for health, efficiency, and general well being of workers. To this end, FLSA generally requires covered employers to pay non exempt employees at least the federal minimum wage for all hours worked and at least 1.5 times the employee's regular rate of pay for every hour worked over 40 hours a week. Week in a work week. In a work week. Keyword. Now I'll tell you why I'm saying that. The Act also requires covered employers to maintain certain records regarding employees and prohibits retaliation against the employees who are discharged or discriminated against after, for example, filing a complaint regarding their pay. However, the FLSA protections do not apply to independent contractors. As used in this rule, the term independent contractor refers to workers who, as a matter of economic reality, are not economically dependent on an employer for work and are in business for themselves. Such workers play an important role in the economy and are commonly referred to by different names, including independent contractors, self employed, and freelancers. This rule is not intended to disrupt the businesses of independent contractors who are, as a matter of economic reality, in business for themselves. Determining whether an employment relationship exists under the FLSA begins with Act's definition. Although the FLSA does not define the term independent contractor, it contains extensive definitions of employer, employee, and employ. Employer is defined to include any person acting directly or indirectly in the interest of an employer in relation to an employee. An employee is defined as any individual employed by an employer. And employee is defined to include to suffer or permit to work. I hope y'all can hear me. As detailed below, courts have developed an analysis that recognizes that independent contractors are not encompassed within these definitions. So, key points: the employer, any person acting directly or indirectly in the interest of an employer in relation to the employee. All right. Direct is the key word. Employee, any individuals employed by an employer and employee. To suffer or permit to work. That means someone is directing you to work. They tell you when to come, when to go, what to do, and how to do it. In 1940, the department and courts have applied an economic reality test to determine whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor under FLSA, grounded in the Act's broad understanding of employment. The ultimate inquiry is whether, as a matter of economic reality, the worker is economically dependent on the employer for work, and is thus an employee, or is in business for themselves and is thus an independent contractor. So, are you working for the employer or you independent contractor? In assessing economic dependency, courts and the department have historically conducted a total of the circumstances analysis, considering multiple factors to determine whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor, with no factor or factors having predetermined weight. There is a significant and widespread uniformity amongst federal courts of appeals in the adoption of an application of an economic reality test. Although there is a slight variation as to the number of factors considered or how the factors are framed, these factors generally include opportunity for profit or loss, investment, permanency, control, whether the work is an integrated part of the employer's business, and skill or initiative. So that's how they're determining that. Chris, can you hear me? In January,
I can.
oh, okay. In January 2021, the department published a rule titled Independent Contractor Status under the Fair Labor Standards, providing guidance of the classification of independent contractors under the
Hey
FSLA.
Mo,
Huh?
you on your channel?
Yeah, I'm supposed to be.
Okay. Well, when you get done, I want to talk to you about something.
Alrighty. Let's see. 2021 independent contractor rule marked a departure from the consistent, long-standing adoption and application of the economic reality test by courts and the Department of how to determine whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor under the FSLA. It determines five economic reality factors to guide the inquiry into a worker status of an employee or independent contractor. Two of the five identified factors: the nature of the degree of control over the work and the worker's opportunity for profit or loss, whether designated as a core factors that were the most prohibitive and carried greater work weight in the analysis. All right, so basically, let me go down. I need to get down to. All right, so here's the final rule. In addition to rescinding the 2021 independent contractor rule, the department is adding Part 795. Specifically, this rule modifies the regulatory text published on January 7th, 2021, addressing whether workers are employees or independent contractors under FSLA. Instead of using the core factors set in the 2021 independent contractor rule, the final rule returns to totally of the circumstances analysis of the economic reality test, in which the factors do not have a predetermined weight and are considered in view of the economic reality of the whole activity. In addition, this is critical revisions to the long-standing analysis that the precedent of the proceed of 2021 independent contractor rule, the final turns long-standing. So basically, hold on. God, I need to get to this freaking wage rate. Hold on. All right. So really, I wanted to at some point when I have more time, I just want to be able to share that there's two standards and that if which people don't like because they like their independence, but the problem is with when corporate or businesses cannot stay afloat. But the two standards, I'm just saying that the standard for a government contractor, which is what I'll pull up as an example. Hold on, is it this one? So the Department of Labor also have a government contractor standard, which changes, could be twice a year or it could be once a year, but it definitely changes July 1st in July a lot of the times. And so here's the latest one for South Carolina, some counties. And this is what I was trying to point out. And I know people keep wanting to tell me people pull their straps up by their put themselves up by their bootstraps, get a second job, get off assistance. But what I'm telling you is that if this executive order was fair for both the private sector and the contractor, if this executive order would then people's wages would not fall under inflation because the federal government ensures that these workers, so the contracts that we govern, all of those employees, the only thing they do is drive veterans to and from their appointments. And I'm going to show you how they actually make more than this. And they 1775 is the minimum that we can pay them. That's the base rate, right? So if I go down to the actual occupation type code of where they actually fall, I have to look and I have to say, okay, does this person, and they're classified as shuttle bus drivers, and this is the occupation code. Does this person, so the rate for Richland County is only 1452, but the rule reads that if the occupation title rate is less than this 1775, I have to pay them the 1775. Says the contractor must pay all covered workers at least 1775 an hour, right? For hours spent on the contract during 2025, we cannot pay them less. So even though it says 1452, we can't. And if you go down a little farther, hold on, let me pull this up so I can see the whole screen. You have to pay them. Hold on, let me slide it over. It says workers in this classification may be entitled to a minimum higher minimum wage under the Executive Order 14026, the 1775 per hour. we don't pay this because this is something else. So this is the wage rate. Please see the note at the top, and I just read it, and it falls under this executive order. And it will go on to say, oh, it says, right here. You also have to pay them sick leave, and that's at least 10. That's for every 30 hours they work, they get 1 hour, not to exceed this 56 hours annually, right? So that means you're giving them at least 56 hours annually. But that's for every 30 hours work. So if you're using a payroll system, it automatically calculates. And we automatically give them money to pay for insurance. If you don't give them sick leave, then you have to pay them $5.55 per hour, up to 40 hours a week. That's an extra $222 a week, or $962 a month. That could cover health insurance. If you give them sick leave, then you pay them the $5.09 per hour, up to 40 hours a week, 203.60 a week, or $882.27 per month. So my point being that uh let's see if I can do it. Let me see. If you did uh let's see if it'll let me do it. Oh, I can just bring up a spreadsheet. This was my whole point with wage rates, is that the federal wage rate, this is private sector, and then federal wage rate executive order. What's the executive order? It is executive order number, should know it by heart, 1426, right? So they're getting, and just make it plain so you can get it, because I don't know why I have to say this a million times. I don't care about the rest. You'll get stuck at a rate. They're getting 725. These folks are getting 1775 plus an additional $5. I mean, an additional 509. So you talking about 2284 versus 725. And this rate here goes up every year for the same work. So it don't matter what demographic you in. It don't matter if you live in rural area versus the urban, inner city versus the country. It doesn't matter. And it depends on your locality, because that was just this area. Depending on your locality, that amount goes up. And so what I'm saying is that, people are like, oh, people should just need to get up and go to work. What I'm saying is that it don't matter if inflation continues to rise and your minimum wage rate for the government, for private sector, is the baseline, 725. They're gonna pay you just a little bit more. Every time it rises, you still not gonna be able to afford to stay nowhere. Period. I don't know why. And everybody's not gonna be a doctor. Everybody's not gonna be a lawyer. Everybody's not gonna be a mechanic. Everybody's not gonna be a scientist. And so when you think about the wages, if you think of it in terms of, okay, if inflation, if I was getting paid, if I was on my job, and now they think, Oh, well, you get $15. We'll do the math. Let's do the math. If you're getting $15 an hour, and rent, let's see. Well, let's do annual. So your annual, we're gonna base it on the total annual hours of a 40-hour week work week. We'll just base it on a 40-hour work week, and that's 2087 according to the rules. And so that would be your gross pay, annual gross pay. That would be that 15 times that 2087. That's 31,000 a year. So let's break it out. All right. So that would be your pay. All right. So let's do rent. If rent if rent is $1,600 a month for a one bedroom times 12, that's you at 19,000 already. Let's subtract that out. Let's see where you at. All right. Let's say your utilities to include cable and internet. Let's say 300. I'm gonna give you on the low end. I ain't even gonna act crazy with it. So let's subtract that. Let's subtract out your utilities. Now you down to 11, and this is annual. Oh, I forgot. That's 300 times 12. Forgot. Now you're left with that. You gotta eat. Let's say you're spending 250 a month. All right. So you have five. So that's what you have left. That's the balance. Now we're gonna take that and we're gonna divide that by 12, and that's how much you have monthly. So that leaves you with monthly your monthly that's how much you have left off the annual salary. Now you have to think, and I only put essentials. Hopefully your car is already paid for, because if you have a car note, that's goodbye. If you got kids, that's goodbye. And this is on $15 an hour, right? Let's say you was making $20 or $40, right? That's how much you got left monthly. Now, if you're making 40, you might have a car note. Throwing that in there. If you have some kids, either way, at any rate, this stuff goes up, right? In some people cases, it may cost just like, those utilities may be a little bit more. This is just an example. But majority of the people do not make $40 an hour. Unless they're up north somewhere and they might not even making it. They might be making 35. Or they might be making 25. You know, that's the point. I can tell you in the Carolinas, they not making that. They might make 18. If that. If that. You're talking about the common person, no education, straight out of high school. Some of those cats, if they're at one